Hey, so this is the follow-up masterclass to the one that we did recently on sales for agencies. This one is going to be on lead generation. And I've actually spent a lot of time last night with pen and paper in hand actually thinking about this. And I think what I've produced is amazing. And if you watch it to the end, you're going to have your whole thinking about lead generation for your agency completely changed. And it's going to make a tremendous difference in your life. And this is stuff that I've never released before and is actually an improvement over everything that we've actually put out before. I've completely reconceptualized how we think about lead generation, and I'm going to explain it to you in this masterclass. So let's start. Let's start from the very basics that everybody knows. And I'm actually going to use the pen to actually draw that here. So we start from basically two people, right? You have your client who's here and you have you who is here. And I'm actually going to label these so that you can know them. So let me just do that. This is the client. And let me just make this a bit smaller. And this is going to be you. So this is where we start when we think about lead generation. And what happens is that you have to do something to the client, right? So that you get him interested to actually work with you. This is where the way most people actually frame the situation. And I've grown to think that this is actually wrong. And I'm going to copy this little guy here and move him to the other side, because we have to take one more factor into account, which is your competition. Right, so these are competitors, because these guys are fighting over the attention of your client, which is limited, just as you are, right? So just as you are trying to get in with the client, so are they, right? And if we think about what we're actually trying to do here, and with the process of lead generation, is that we're trying to reach out to a client and tell him, look, we understand that you have this problem and we are the ones who can actually help you solve the problem, right? Fundamentally, that's what it is, right? So if I'm to sort of draw this, let me just make this a bit thicker as well. If I'm to sort of draw this, the client is having a problem, right? So there's sort of like a fire here. This is what this is meant to represent. That they need your help, or anyway somebody's help, to actually put out, right? So this is pain or problem. Whatever that pain or problem is doesn't matter. And many people, they think, oh, my lead generation is not working, when in fact it's not that their lead generation is not working. Let me just put the eyes on the guy as well. And he's obviously sad, right? Because he's not happy, because there's this pain or problem that's burning him underneath that he actually wants to solve. Most people, when they think about this, they think that they've tried to send an offer or some messages to the client, right? And it's not working, the client doesn't respond, and they immediately think, oh, the problem is not real. And that's false. And I can give you for a fact why it's false. Because, for example, I know the agency world very, very well, right? I know that 90% of the agencies out there need more leads, right? And they need better quality leads, and they need sales processes, and they struggle with these things because most agency owners are creative. I know this for a fact, right? I don't need an agency owner to actually tell me this, because I've been in this market and I've worked with hundreds of agency owners, and I know that everybody actually has these problems. Right? So if everybody has these problems, why can't I just say to an agency owner who I've never met before, who's a stranger, why can't I just say to him, I'm going to help you get booked meetings on your calendar, and let's say you pay me this much in return for this many booked leads, or whatever the promise is going to be. Why can't I just do that and actually build business, right? Because that's what you would expect. There's a problem, right? It's not being solved. I have a solution. Why isn't the client actually buying, right? And that's the big problem. That's why lead generation is so hard. It's not because the problem is not there, because many people would try to help this guy to get more clients, and they'd be like, oh, they're not really responding. It means that they don't actually need more clients, which is not true, right? That's false. So we have to uncover what's actually really happening here underneath. right? So this pain problem that they have, in our case, right, the clients needs more, they need more leads, their business is stagnating, it's not growing. There's some cause to this problem, right? So, and that's what both your competitors and you are trying to fix, right? So I'm just going to draw this, and this, by the way, is meant to be a canister, right? So I'm just going to draw this. This is meant to be a canister, right? And this is sort of the oil that's fueling the fire, right? So I'm going to label this. This is the cause of our problem, and it's basically what's actually fueling this fire and pain for the client and maintaining it, right? So why are agencies not getting enough leads, right? That's basically the question in our case. What's the cause behind that? And usually there are going to be multiple causes, right? That's sort of what we're exploring here as well. Maybe somebody, as we explored in part 1 when we talked about sales, maybe they don't have an effective sales process, right? So obviously they're not closing any new business. Maybe they don't have a sales process that works outside of their referrals. Maybe they don't have a lead generation process. They don't understand what they have to do, which is what we're talking about here, right? It doesn't matter what the cause is. There can be multiple causes. But the key for you is to understand that there is a root cause here that you actually have to solve, right? So both you and your competitors, you're sort of trying to guess or estimate what the cause is and explaining to the client that that's what's actually causing his problem, and you can help him fix this cause and therefore eliminate the problem and get to his desired state, right? Which is the state which doesn't have the problem, whatever that problem is. So what actually is needed to fix the cause? Right, that's what we call the solution, right? So I'm just going to try to draw it as a key. Probably it's not going to be a very good key, but this is meant to be a key at least. And this is what your clients are looking for, right? So this is the solution. So this right here that we're looking at, the solution, basically the cause and the pain problem, they're together and they're sort of the objective. And I'm going to write that next to everything here. And I'm actually going to draw a line here, not a connection line. I just want to draw a line. Let's see if it's going to let me draw it. Perfect. And let me make it a bit thicker. Awesome. Yeah, so there's this line. So everything underneath here is basically objective, right? This is what's actually happening out there, right? The client is experiencing a pain or a problem, and that pain or problem has a cause, and there's some solution out there that can remove the cause and therefore solve the problem. Now, there's also something that's happening subjectively now in the mind of the client, and that's the result of the interaction between your competitors, your clients, and you, right? All three participants. And that's what we're going to look at next, right? So let me just draw another line here, and we're going to say that everything above this line is not objective but subjective this time. And we're going to look at what those interactions actually involve and what are the elements that are actually involved there. So what actually happens? Like, how do you and your competitors relate to this same sort of client that you're trying to reach out to in your lead generation efforts, or anyway, have them reach out to you if you're doing inbound versus outbound, right? So in both cases, what are you trying to do? Right? And in both cases, you are trying to get some message across to this client, right? So I'm going to try to draw something here that basically looks like an envelope. Let me make it a bit, I don't know if I can make this a bit thicker, but perhaps I should be able to. There we go. And let me just actually draw it so that it looks like an envelope, right? This is meant to be an envelope, and it's the message that both your competitors and you are trying to get to the client. And let me group these and actually copy it, because obviously you and your competitors both are trying to send messages to your client. And I'm going to put multiple of these envelopes here, right? Because it's not like just one message is reaching the client. It's more like multiple messages are trying to reach the client, and this is your message, And let me see if I can make this a different color so that it stands out a bit more and you can see it as your message. Okay, so this is your message, and your competitors, they have their own messages here. And the big thing is that you're both trying to get messages across to your client and get the client to actually believe the message and obviously take some action, go for the solution that you're suggesting, and obviously give you the money so that you can fix the cause and eliminate the problem. Now, inside the client's mind, right? So in terms of how these messages get to the client, right? And I'm going to draw this here. Obviously, some of the messages, it's the client reaching out to the message, right? So this is sort of what's happening in this situation. The client is the one that's actually reaching out to the message. Let me see if I can make this into a arrow. Perfect. So the client is reaching out to the message. That's what we call inbound, right? If you post content, for example, on LinkedIn or on Instagram or anywhere else, right? That's the client reaching out. The client has a problem. They scroll around, they see your content, and then it interests them and they read it, right? So that's one way. And obviously there's obviously also the other way, which is basically the other way around, right? So in that case, the message is actually reaching out to the client. So there's this back and forth in both cases, both between your messages and the messages that obviously your competition is sending to the client. And what we're going to try to do is obviously have your message stand out and be able to influence the client, because I mean, that's the challenge, right? We need to get your message to actually be heard and stand out above the rest. That's sort of the challenge of lead generation that we're trying to solve. So hopefully you understand this, and I'm going to label these for additional clarity. So these are competitor messages, offers, right? So both of them really. And these are obviously your message and offers. Okay, and we have, as I said, we have some inbound, right? The client reaching out, and we have some outbound, which is you reaching out. So this is the inbound, and this is the outbound. Now, there's the third thing that we actually need to make sense of this, right? So what actually happens? So all these messages get sent. So what's actually processing these messages, right? It's the client, and the client processes these messages through some sort of conversation, right, that the client has in their mind, right? So that's what this represents. This is basically the conversation that your client has inside of their mind. And let me try to make it a bit bigger. Let me move inbound to here so that it's a bit more clear and we don't have any problems understanding what this is, right? So this is the conversation. Let me make it black and let me label it. This is internal conversation or dialogue that the client has. And this is basically super important because this determines what action the client is actually going to take. And if he's going to go for your offer or not, right? And that's the big thing, because obviously we all put these offers in front of the clients. What actually determines if the client is going to listen to yours versus all the other ones? And this is where most people make huge mistakes when it comes to lead generation, because what most people do is very simple, right? They look at this, right? And what they care about, and I will see if I can do this maybe in green to show you. The only thing that they think about is basically what their message is, right? And then what's the cause of the problem and what's the solution and what's the pain, right? So they sort of think just about these things that I've highlighted for you, right? They ignore their competitors completely, right? So they never think, what's my competitor doing? They never think what the competitor is offering to this same client and how the competitors are trying to solve this problem and what sort of causes they're going after. And they never think about the internal conversation that's going on in the client's mind, right? I'm just going to remove these so that we don't mess up the diagram. But they never take these things into account, and therefore their lead generation falls flat and they don't get any results from it. And the only way you're going to get results from your lead generation, and this is supremely important for you to understand, is that you have to solve both the objective side of this problem, right, which is down here, and the subjective side of the problem. And you may ask, how do I actually solve these problems? So what I encourage you to do is actually draw out this diagram and ask yourself, what's the problem or pain that your customer is experiencing? And write it down. And I would write no more than 3. Pick the top 3, whatever they are. What are the potential causes, right, of those pains or problems, right? Why is the client actually experiencing that? And then finally, what should the solution be? And don't say just your service, because that's stupid. You're not thinking objectively, right? You have to think objectively. What's objectively the solution to this pain or problem? Such that if you had this pain or problem, with that solution, you could actually eliminate the cause and therefore eliminate the pain and problem that it was creating in your life, right? That's what you have to answer, and you have to answer it honestly and objectively. A lot of people, for example, do Google Ads, and then they think that every business that moves or breathes needs Google Ads. That's stupid, right? That's not the way the world works. And you have to try to think objectively here and answer, ignoring basically what you offer is, but answer objectively what this guy actually needs to solve his problems. So take our case, right? We offer lead generation services. So what's the pain or problem? The pain or problem is that their agency is stagnating. They're stuck with their network and referrals. They can't generate business out of it. They have no predictability, right? And they just struggle to grow and achieve their aims, right? That's sort of a summary of the problems and pains that they face. Now you have to ask, what's actually causing these problems, right? What are the causes? And when we talked about the causes, we sort of talked already about this, and we said, maybe they have a problem with their sales process. Some people that's going to be true for them. Others have a problem with their lead generation, like they're not aware of the things that we're talking about now. Others actually know what they should be doing, but they're not doing it because they don't have the time, right? You have multiple causes, and you're going to list all of them out so that you can see them. Now, for each cause of a problem, you need to come up with a solution, right? If their sales process doesn't work, for example, it's not enough for us to go to them and say we're going to get you booked appointments on your calendar, right? Because they're not going to convert those booked appointments. And it's why our company doesn't do just lead generation, and we're actually a training company that teaches them how to implement these processes so that they can get results out of lead generation, right? Because otherwise they would just not be getting any results, right? So can you see how we have actually adjusted our service to match and solve the causes of the pains and problems that our clients face? We're not stuck on a service. We just do cold email, for example, and that's it, right? Because that doesn't matter. Ultimately, we have to solve the pain and problem of the client. And to solve that, we have to identify the cause correctly, right? And then create solutions, doesn't matter what those are, for their pains and problems and the causes behind them, right? So this is how you analyze the objective side of things, and under each one of those categories you brainstorm, what are the actual causes here, and you list them out, the pains the same way, and obviously the same for the solutions. And you're going to think obviously how and which ones out of those you can provide to the client, which ones you can recommend or maybe partner with somebody else, but you're going to build a comprehensive solution for the pains and problems that your clients have in this way. So this is how you solve the objective side. And this is very, very important. A lot of you seem to think that with a crappy solution, right, if you just had the right marketing and the right lead generation strategies, you'd get work. And that's not true. That's false, right? And even if you would get work, your clients would not stick with you and you'd be back to where you started from, right? So it's not enough to solve the subjective. You have to solve the objective as well. Now, moving on. In terms of the practical aspects, obviously you have to put some message in front of your client, right? Whether it's through outbound by reaching out to them or directly through inbound. If you do it through outbound, then your message and your offer becomes supremely important, Whereas if you do it through inbound, it's more like you have to speak about the pain and problem that they have so that you attract them to start with and get them to explore it on their own before obviously they get to your message and offer itself, right? So there's a bit of a difference there, but essentially it's the same process. And what you have to think about is what's the internal conversation that's going on in this person's mind. And that internal conversation is determined pretty much by the context that they find themselves in, right? So the context is basically the messages that they are receiving from your competitors, right? So take our case. We're not the only lead generation agency on earth. Therefore, what's actually happening to agencies? A lot of them, they got scammed, for example, by lead generation companies. They saw a message, get 50 booked meetings or your money back, and they actually purchased from that provider. They pay, let's say, $10,000. They never saw even a single meeting. They never got their money back. That guy just ran away with their money. And therefore, what's the conversation that's now going on in their mind? Lead generation agencies are scams. Right? These are not trustworthy. They don't work. This is not going to work. This is not going to help me build new business. Right? So when I put my message out there, right, it's not enough for me to think, oh, I'm just going to help you generate leads and get more new clients and grow your agency, right? Because they've already heard all of that stuff before, right? And it didn't work for them. So why didn't it work for them, right? We're going back now down here to what sort of the cause of those problems. And very often it doesn't work because their problems don't come from lead generation. They come from something else, a problem with the sales process, a problem with their offers, a problem with the quality of their work, which is very, very frequent and true for a lot of agencies, whether they like to admit it or not. So all of these things, you have to actually think about them to determine what's the actual truth here so that you can speak the truth to your client. Right? And the moment that your message actually speaks the truth to your client, it's going to stand out because it's going to acknowledge what all of these guys here are telling him, right? So the message may even start like, you may be tired from receiving messages from lead generation companies promising you blah, 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 right? That's acknowledging the conversation that's already going in their mind. And then it can say something like, but certainly you know that there are agencies out there who are growing and who are getting business predictably and who don't have to rely just on their referral network, right? That's what it might say. So you can see how we tap into the conversation that already exists in the client's mind, right? And then we use that conversation to actually introduce our message in a context where that message is going to stand out and they're going to see, wow, this is very, very different from all these guys, right? And you have multiple criterias and multiple differentiators that you can rely on, right? You can rely on the quality of your case studies. Maybe competitors just put a video testimonial. Maybe you have an entire write-up, right? So for example, right, for us, it's like, this is how our case studies look. We say, you know, who the client is. There's a video testimonial. We say a bit about their challenges, the solution we implemented for them, and the results they obtained. And a testimonial, right, in written format. So you can see that's a big differentiator compared to most other companies that do what we do and that are trying to generate leads. Somebody's going to look at our offer and they're going to be like, wow, you know, these guys, they actually do a lot better. We have, for example, a Trustpilot account. They see that we rated excellent on Trustpilot. They say, wow, you know, these guys are different. These are a real company. Now, so can you see how all these differentiators that you include in your own messages shift the internal conversation that's going on in the client's mind in your favor, right? And especially once you explain to the client why he actually failed with all these other guys, right? Why he actually failed. Then he's going to see yours as a valid solution. And obviously that's going to lead to the next step, which is booking a meeting with you, right? It's not going to happen until they see that. You may need more assets to do that, right? Like, for example, we have this document which sort of walks them through exactly how our service works in a lot of detail that we can send to nurture people. You need to prepare assets like that. Obviously, your LinkedIn profile needs to be impeccable, right? Like a professional photo there. A lot of people discount these, but it's actually these small things that make the biggest difference in lead generation, right? Because they're going to check out your LinkedIn profile, right? Do you look credible? Do you look like a trusted authority, or do you just look like a fly-by-night company that popped in one day and, then they were gone, right? That's going to make a huge difference. And you need to take into account this, because this is how you're actually going to be able to shift this internal conversation that's going on in their mind in your favor, and actually get them to see that you're different and that you can help them actually solve this pain or problem. Not just potentially solve it, but actually solve it. Give them that confidence that you can do it, and therefore get them to actually book a meeting or a sales call with you, and transition from lead generation to sales, which is what we discussed before. So hopefully this gives you a much clearer picture of what's actually going on, the importance of the context of what your competitors are doing, and what you have to do to actually stand out. And to help you even more, I've sort of put together these 10 commandments, right, of lead generation, and they are sort of the steps that you need to follow through to actually get results, right? So first, you start by defining your ICP. Who's your client? And what do they actually look like? Are they agencies? How big are they if they're agencies? What sort of issues they're dealing with? What sort of demographics they're part of? What sort of psychographics define them, and so on. Then you have to assess their pain, right? So you dig a lot deeper into what their pains or problems are. So for us, for example, ICP is agencies who are not just starting out, who are doing, at least $100,000, $150,000 per year, right? Or they could even do $1 million plus per year, right? The upper limit is not so well defined, but at least $150,000 or more per year. What's their pain? They're just getting by with their referral network, and people they know, and all connections they may have had in the past. And they can't grow beyond that. They're stuck, they're stagnating, and they need to grow. That's their big pain. What's the cause of that pain? They lack processes, right? They lack processes in terms of sales, they lack processes in terms of lead generation, and they lack the fundamentals that makes for a good agency, right? A good agency is an agency that's capable to build business, and we're going to talk about that in the next part, right? So that's sort of the cause. So what's the right solution, right? So it's a combination of service, stuff that we can do for them, with stuff that they need to do, right? So it's a combination, in our case, of lead generation and training. What messages are they receiving from our competitors? We've already covered that. Get 90 meetings in the first 90 days or your money back, stuff that they don't believe, that sounds absurd to them, like build $50 million worth of business in the next 90 days, stuff that basically makes no sense. That's what they receive, and therefore they have no trust in lead generation agencies. So then we have to craft a message that stands out. We spoke above about that. We back up the message with proof and or low risk through, for example, guarantees and some such, but proof is very important. So case studies, testimonials, videos, stuff of that nature. We have outstanding support assets, so a website that looks impeccable, in our case, a LinkedIn profile with professional photography, Google Documents to explain the service, case studies, all of that good stuff, so that somebody new can actually trust us and they know that we're a real company, our Trustpilot account, and so on and so forth, right? And then we publish content or we reach out to them. In our case, we do both. And obviously, we iterate based on the feedback on our messaging. Right? And these are the 10 commandments. If you follow these, you're going to be successful eventually with your lead generation. It's not going to be a problem for you, right? So hopefully this gives you a much better idea of what's actually involved when it comes to generating leads for your agency. And hopefully it shattered your paradigm, the way you were typically thinking about it in a simplistic way in terms of how to do lead generation. And you have a more advanced model of how this actually works that's going to empower you and going to make a huge difference in your agency. So this brings an end to part 2. If you would like a PDF that's written out and that breaks down this process in a lot of detail, comment lead gen down below this post and I'll be sending that out to you. And that's pretty much it at this point. There is going to be a third part to this masterclass that we're going to do, which is going to cover the fundamentals of actually building a great agency, right? So we've covered sales, we've covered lead generation, and now we're going to cover the base, the foundation of what it takes to succeed. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to talking with you soon.